You're literally learning how to keep a human alive. You're barely sleeping, and if one more thing tells you that you're doing it wrong, it can be just like too much to take. I get it. My baby is 14 months old and isn't walking. My baby isn't rolling yet. My neighbor's baby is crawling and mine isn't. What did I do wrong? If anyone gives you a singular, flat answer to any of those questions, they don't know what they're talking about. Welcome, I'm so glad you're here. My name is Casey Waugh and I am an occupational therapist from Pittsburgh. This video is going to walk you through the path that kids generally take in their first year to year and a half when it comes to gross motor control, fine motor control, and to hopefully help you calm some of the fears that you might be feeling if your kid isn't hitting a milestone on the exact month that the app tells you that they're supposed to. We're gonna go over what to really be looking for when it comes to development generally, and what some actual red flags might be and how to deal with them. As soon as you get pregnant or you are ready to bring a baby home, whether it's from foster care or adoption, you do one Google search of what should my baby be doing, how old should my baby be when they do this, and you are bombarded with apps, timelines, checklists, developmental milestone lists that go on and list every single little tiny detail. It's overwhelming. And those milestone checklists and guides and apps are all well and good until your sweet, perfect little bean doesn't do something that they are supposed to. If you can relate to that, send me a comment down below. Just want to remind you right out of the gate that developmental checklists and milestones are based around ages and ranges. They're not law. That means, like, when you look at one of those checklists, it generally will say between 0 to 6 months, these are all the things that your baby is doing. Some checklists might say at 5 months, baby rolls. That does not mean that every baby in the entire world rolls on their 5th month birthday. It just doesn't work like that. So please do not fall into the trap of comparing your baby's one specific skill to all of these other babies on the internet. There always will be a baby at this end of the normal range and at this end of the normal range. People are always like, oh, my baby did this so early, they're a genius. And great, I'm so happy for them. But that does not mean a baby who does something at the end of the normal range is wrong by any stretch of the imagination. So that's what we're going to talk about. There is a range of normal, and there are also some red flags that might let you know if something is outside of that range, if it's something you need to talk to your doctor about or seek out some professional help, because there might be something else going on. So take a deep breath, hit the subscribe button and the little bell to let you know when my videos get released every week. And while you're there, let me know how old your little ones are, or if you are pregnant when you're due, if you're adopting when you're expecting your baby to come home. I'd love to know how old your kids are, and tell me a little bit about yourself. Okay, the first most important thing that you need to remember when it comes to development is that it is not linear. It's not even a straight incline. If I could draw what development looks like in the first year of life, it would be like a giant jig-jag mountain. That is normal. When a baby learns a new skill, regardless of what it is, that does not mean in her little brain she goes, check, and moves on to the next skill. Oh, I learned how to hold my head up. Check, I'm going to sit now. Check, I'm going to crawl now. Check, I'm going to walk. It doesn't happen like that. Babies' brains are fascinating. They learn so much information in such a short time. But that doesn't mean that babies can learn every skill that is available to them at the same time. As a quick example of this, before I go too far down on a tangent, let's think about an infant who, when you hold them at your shoulder, they're holding their head up. If we were looking at development like a straight line, all right, head control, check. But what happens when you sit them on the ground and they're learning to support themselves when they sit? The little bobblehead comes back, right? If we were looking at a straight line, that head control would be there regardless of what position they're in. But we know that's not true because when they were up here, you were holding their whole body. When they're sitting, now they have to think about their stomach, their back, where their arms go, what their legs are doing. So their head control goes backwards, and that is normal. So that is just a little example to help you see that when a child learns a new skill, it is very normal to see some of the skills they used to be really good at go backwards a little bit for a short amount of time. They'll catch up, but they just need to work on one major thing at a time. They can't learn all of these things in one single day. Back to that jaggedy mountain, doesn't that make you feel a little bit better that those ups and downs and even plateaus where they're doing pretty much the same thing for a while, up and down, that is normal. Okay, so let's jump in with some of the gross motor milestones. Gross motor means big muscle groups. So we're thinking your core, like your abs and your back muscles, and then also your big muscles in your arms and your legs. So our major ones that we're going to touch on in this video are sitting, rolling, crawling, and walking. There are a ton of other tiny little milestones within there, and if you're looking at like a full developmental checklist, you're going to see all of those, and that's what gets kind of overwhelming. So we're just looking at the big ones, the ones that parents are most aware of or concerned about. Those are the ones that we're going to be talking about in general. And maybe you can keep count of how many times I say general or generally in this video. All right, let's start with rolling. That's what tends to happen first before they can sit. Generally, babies roll from their belly to their back first, and it's usually to get out of tummy time. If you're having struggles with tummy time, you are not alone. Watch my video here to learn about why tummy time is so challenging and some tips and tricks on how to make it go a little bit easier for baby and for you. Rolling can happen anywhere from 2 months to 5 months. If your baby rolls from back to belly first, cool. If your baby rolls from their side to their other side and then to their back, but not all the way to their belly, cool. Red flags when it comes to rolling. Rolling before 2 months could be a sign that there is high muscle tone. That's definitely something that you'll want to pursue some professional help to help you navigate that as an infant and then up through their development. Another red flag would be not rolling in any way, shape, or form, direction by 5 months. Or if you notice that when they're rolling, they're ignoring like a whole side of their body. They're not able to go a certain direction. They're always rolling the one way. Those are 2 big red flags to look at. So it's not my baby rolled from side to side at 3 months, but they didn't roll from this way to that way at 5 months. We're looking at, in general, is the baby able to do that? If they're not rolling at all by 5 months, that is a red flag. Check out the description list at the bottom, or the description box, whatever it's called. There is a checklist down there of things to do if you feel your baby has one of these red flag signals. Okay, that's all we're gonna say about rolling. Next, let's look at sitting. So around 5 or 6 months, your baby should be able to prop themselves up on their arms when they're sitting. Independent sitting that is steadier comes from about 5 months to 8 months. They can still be propping at this point, but they're able to hold it for a little bit longer and they just look more sturdy. A red flag with sitting would be if your child is not sitting without your support at all by 9 months, that's a red flag. So here's a side note about sitting. My son did not like to sit. From day one, he was a mover. So that meant actually like focusing on staying still and sitting was hard for him because he just wanted to move. He wanted to reach for toys. He wanted to go over there. So that meant he kept falling over. But that doesn't mean that he was not sitting on time, because he was able to hold that position, maybe only for a few seconds, but he was doing it. So when it comes to sitting, we're not, again, looking at necessarily the length of time, 10 seconds, 30 seconds, 1 minute. We're looking at the quality of how well they can do it, and if they can do it at all, and if they're getting enough practice to work on it. So because my little bean was a mover and a shaker, that meant we practiced sitting more often because he needed to have continuous little bursts of practice to build up those muscles instead of just one giant chunk of sitting practice in the morning, you know. So it's not what specific length of time or when day and month that happened, but whether they can do it at all, what the quality of that is, and if they're not doing it by like 9 months, that's a good sign that you should look for some other help or some other reasons why we're not getting there. All right, next is crawling. Ask any OT or PT, and really crawling from a developmental standpoint is when they're doing like the army crawl, their belly's on the ground, and technically when they're up on hands and knees, that's creeping. Not a necessary thing to know. But if you are looking at a checklist or a milestone list and it says creeping and crawling and you're like, what is the difference? That's the difference. So for the purposes of this video, we're calling it crawling because in day-to-day speak, that's what people call it. Army crawling, belly on the ground, usually starts around 7 to 9, even 10 months. And sometimes babies start by moving backwards. That's normal. Up on hands and knees crawling is usually like 9 to 11 months. So remember my son, the mover, he army crawled for a really long time because he got really fast at it and he could get across the room really quickly, and being up on hands and knees requires more work, and he just didn't have time for that. So he was an army crawler for a long time. But again, going back to whether he could actually do it and giving him the opportunity to practice it, I was aware that crawling up on hands and knees is super, super important. Super, super important. That I gave him opportunities to practice that. Army crawling was preferred because he was so fast. It was like, it was hilarious to watch him like scoot his way across the room. But up on hands and knees, he could do it. We practiced it. So that just goes to show you again that we're not looking at only the specific month that something happens. We're looking at the quality and whether they can do it at all, and if you're giving them opportunities to practice it. So if your child is not crawling, army crawling, or up on hands and knees by 11 or 12 months, that's a red flag. Finally, walking. Saved the best for last, right? This is the one that parents often put so much emphasis on, and it's a tough one because we have this idea in our mind that babies should be walking by their first birthday or, you know, very soon after. But what if I told you that the normal range for walking, ready for this, 9 months to 18 months. Are you looking at me like I have 5 heads? That's normal. A baby who walks at 9 months, yeah, that's pretty early, but it's still considered normal. Some babies do it. 18 months is still normal. Now, I will say, if you're getting close, 16, 17, 18 months, and your child is not wanting to put any weight on their legs, or you have to support their whole body, you're not able to just like hold their arms and help them walk, you're getting close to 17, 18 months, that's a time when you want to talk to your doctor or maybe look into getting a referral for PT. But true independent walking Even up to 18 months, that's still in the normal range. Walking is a very complex skill. It takes a ton of foundational skills to be able to do it. And I'm not just talking about the actual gross motor skills that come before that, like sitting and crawling and rolling, like we already talked about, but walking also brings in their emotional development, their self-confidence. Have you ever seen a little guy who, like, you're like, I know you can walk, but they want to do it right, or they aren't quite there with their confidence yet? That is still part of how well or when a child walks. That doesn't mean that there's anything wrong or different about them. It just, walking is so complex. It takes a lot of thought and coordination and everything, social, emotional, motor development, all of that. Motivation. That all goes into when a child decides to walk on their own. So all I'm gonna say in regard to walking in this video as far as red flags go, if your child is not walking independently, like no hands held, no furniture to hold on to, they still need support, and you're at 18 months, I would bring it up to your doctor. Before we get into fine motor control, I'm gonna do a little insert here because I keep saying, talk to your doctor. Sometimes parents say, I did tell my doctor, and they said, don't worry about it. Okay, so let's talk about why that might be. Like we said before, development is not a straight line. It goes up and down, and it plateaus, and it does all of these things. So from a healthcare perspective, when you're looking at development, you don't look at one skill by itself. It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't give you a whole picture of what is going on with that sweet little baby. So let's say, for example, a baby is late with rolling, but then next week they're propping themselves up to sit. And then the week after that, they're sitting by themselves, and then they get into hands and knees. Sometimes things are smushed so close together, and it's okay. Baby was late with rolling, but early with sitting. So when it comes to motor skills, a doctor is not going to say they didn't walk by 12 months and necessarily send you right to a PT. If you have concerns about your child's development, I recommend getting the checklist in the description box, because this video is going to be super, super long if I go into everything, and my goal here is just to give you those ranges and help you to see what is normal. And if you do have those red flags, seriously, let me know, reach out to me, and also download that checklist because it will help you take the next step. All right, next, fine motor control. So this one was harder for me to narrow down because I'm an OT and fine motor control is more our deal. In regard to fine motor control, I narrowed it down to reaching, grasping, and pinching. Technically, I want to note that oral motor skills, or how you move your tongue around in your mouth, which relates to how well you move food around in your mouth, is a fine motor skill. It's a small muscle group, but feeding and oral motor control is such a giant topic on its own that I did not include it in this video. We would be here for 9 hours. All right, first, reaching. Intentional reaching towards a toy or an object usually starts to happen around 2 to 3 months. So anything before that, like grasping or moving their arms, is totally driven by reflex. Now, I know grandmas and grandpas love to have that baby grab their finger and they say, oh, he's the strongest baby in the whole world. That's fine. Let them have that. But I'm here to tell you that that grasp is totally driven by reflex. The baby is not doing that on purpose. Reaching and grabbing on purpose usually starts around 2 to 3 months, and that's when babies will also start to try to bring stuff to their mouth, and that's what we want. Babies learn about their world by feeling things around their mouth. Seriously, that is so important to let your baby mouth toys that are safe. So a red flag would be if your baby is not reaching towards a toy or any object intentionally at all by like 4 months. That's a red flag. You might want to look at whether there is some vision concerns going on, or, you know, also if they're only using one arm all the time and this arm is just kind of hanging out, that's a red flag. A final red flag when it comes to reaching and starting to grasp would be if your baby's like 4 months or older and their hands are still in fists most of the time. By that time, they should be resting their hands more open and being able to move their fingers. So if you see fists and they're like 4 months still, red flag. Okay, a pincer pinch is when you pinch something between these two fingers. So when it comes to development, like I said, there are so many tiny little things that go on before you get to this. And when it comes to babies, there's like a ton of different ways they figure out how to pick things up. So it starts by, if you give them something small that's safe for them, they're gonna start by raking it or like scooping it up. You won't see a pinch, and it's not gonna be like this. You'll probably see all the fingers splayed out. You might see lots of fingers trying to do it. You're not gonna see a pinch to pick up something small like a Cheerio until like 12 months.
Okay, I'm gonna pause right here because that isn't really what I meant. I said 12 months when a pinch would happen, but what actually I meant to say was that a nice clean fine pinch where their arm is not resting on the table and they can do it really nicely in like the advanced way. You'll see that at 12 months. Not that you won't see a pinch until 12 months. Okay, proceed.
OT in me is coming out strong here. That does not mean that the first time you give them the opportunity to pick something up that is small is 12 months. Because all of those other figuring out ways to do things lead up to being able to pick something up like that. So I know that you can often be scared about your baby putting something in their mouth, choking. That is a very real risk, and you have to be aware of that. Watch this video about choking versus gagging, and it goes into how to feed your baby to know the difference between choking and gagging. But this is to say that there are safe ways to help your baby develop a pinch without giving them like a plate of little tiny pebbles that they can swallow. Okay. I hope that wasn't too overwhelming. So if you liked this video, give it a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments. And also, if you resonated with or feel like you're like, oh yeah, okay, my child is kind of doing this and that was a red flag that you said, check out that checklist that I have in the description box to give you some next steps on what to do if you identify with one of those red flags. Check out those other videos that I mentioned and hit the subscribe button and the bell so you know when I'm sending out some new content. And yeah, I'm so glad you're here, and thanks for sticking around and watching to the end. I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you guys next time. Toodles!